Christine Schneider, the Visceral Voice.
Welcome to the Visceral Voice podcast. I'm your host, Christine Schneider. Through this podcast, I aim to bring you the most current, up-to-date research on voice science, function, pain science, movement, and everything in between. I am on a quest to learn everything I can about the living, breathing body and its intricate connection to the voice. This podcast documents the continuation of my learning and my experience as a professional singer, a nutritional consultant, a movement specialist, and a manual therapist. Join us as we strive to provide current, knowledgeable, creative, and compassionate information to help you restore, regain, and create happiness and success on your vocal journey. Tierney Gunthorpe has been a physiotherapist for over 17 years, and during this time, she always worked in private practice. She obtained her Bachelor of Science in Physical Therapy from Queen's University in 2005, and then her Master's in Clinical Physiotherapy in 2012 from Curtin University in Perth, Australia. Since she became a physio, she doesn't just focus on your area of pain, she identifies and corrects the root cause. She believes in whole client treatment, giving you an all-around treatment approach that has better results than just treating the symptoms. When she started to have her own sleep issues after she stopped nursing her son during the night, she wanted to find out why she was having a sleeping issue instead of just taking pills. She hated the woman she was becoming, impatient, cranky, short-tempered, tired all the time, unable to do her job well, so she knew she had to make a change. She took several courses in sleep, she read, she researched sleep, and after fixing her own sleeping issues, she became a sleep coach. After noticing there is a huge gap between the healthcare system and sleep. Sleep is the foundation of our health. We break down our bodies during the day, and we repair them at night. She cares about her clients and provides an individualized approach to your sleep issues. She takes the time to listen to your story, do a full assessment to completely understand your problem, the root causes, and identifies core areas to focus on in order to improve your sleep quality. There is no greater satisfaction than helping someone waking up rested with a clear mind, feeling good to take on another good day. I am very excited to give you my conversation with Tierney. We had such a wonderful time talking about sleep disorders and all things sleep related. So here you are, my conversation with Tierney Gunthorpe. Hi, Tierney. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I am super stoked to talk about everything we are talking about today. So I would love to start with just having you tell the listeners about your work as a physio and what kind of led you to specialize in upper airway and sleep disorders.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I've been a physio for 18 years now. And so I still love being a physio. And ever since I've been a physio, I've always wanted to find the root cause of injuries, right? Not just they come in with the shoulder and just treat the shoulder. You have to look everywhere for what's causing that shoulder pain. And then I was always interested in breathing. And it wasn't until after I had my kids and after I had my son and I stopped nursing him at nighttime, I still was waking up throughout the night. And then I just thought I had to retrain myself, but I was totally wrong when I started doing my research and I realized I had an undiagnosed sleeping disorder, which is sleep disorder breathing. And then that opened up a whole slew of things. And then I realized that so many people, they consider it a hidden epidemic, and so many people don't realize they have a sleep disorder because it can present just as insomnia, right? Or people dismiss snoring and grinding their teeth or clenching, right? But those are all signs of sleep disorder breathing. And that's how I got into it, because I had my own issues. And then when I fixed my own issues, I realized there's such a need, and there's a gap between our healthcare system and sleep, that
Mm.
sleep doesn't get addressed. And it's the
Yeah.
foundation of everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to have sleep. Isn't it? I mean, I don't know the days, but can't we go like longer without food and water than we can without sleep?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So incredible. So, okay, let's dive in a little bit about talking about sleep. And I know you've posted on your site, and please, listeners, check out Tierney's Instagram. So you've posted on your site the importance of nitric oxide and breathing in through your nose. And I will often talk about that too. And so I'd love to expand on that. I loved your post on that and how important it is for not just our breathing, but also for our circulatory system and our heart and our heart rate variability. If you don't mind kind of just diving in and talking to us about what's happening, why is it important to nasal breathe?
Well, when we nasal breathe, that's where our nitric oxide is, right? So if you don't nasal breathe, you do not get that benefit of the nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is not just benefit, like it helps clear the air, but it also is a vasodilator, right? So it dilates our blood vessels. So we could decrease our blood pressure by breathing through our nose. It's also an antioxidant and is also an anti-inflammatory. So it has so many benefits in our body that it impacts pretty much all our cellular processes.
I did
And
not
so,
remember that it was an anti-inflammatory.
yeah, yeah. So it just does everything, right? So, and the best way to get the nitric oxide, like, people talk about you can eat your foods with nitric oxide, but the best way is just a nose breathe, because then
Mm,
that's where you get the nitric oxide.
wow. Yeah, I mean, I've studied or I've read a lot. There are a lot of books out on breathing now that in the last probably, I don't know, 8 years or so that have come out. And I think in every single one of them, they mention the importance of nasal breathing. And I'll still have clients be like, "Is it though? Is it really that important?" I'm like, "Yes, it's really important." I mean, from a vocal standpoint, I talk about what happens with nasal breathing versus oral breathing on at the laryngeal level, and what's happening with an increase of musculature that's happening if we're breathing through our mouth for mouth breathing. But the importance of this nitric oxide and the mention of it being an anti-inflammatory, which I didn't remember. I'm sure I've read it, but I did not remember it until you just mentioned it. And the importance of it on our vascular system as a vasodilator, the ability of it to help with heart rate variability. Do you want to talk about heart rate variability for a minute?
Yeah. So like the heart rate variability, right? So it's how well your heart responds to your breathing, right? And then so when we're into our sympathetic system, we are breathing faster. When we're breathing in, that's our sympathetic activation, and then as we breathe out, it's our parasympathetic nervous system. And our heart rate will go with our breathing. And if our breathing is more through the nasal and more controlled, we'll have a better control of our heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Yeah, I think it's surprising to people that you want more variability with your heart.
Yes.
People are like, "Oh no, I don't want to see that big of a sign." You do. With heart variability, you want to see a larger variable between how the pulse is with your inhalation versus how the pulse is with your exhalation. And that's that with that heart rate variability. Yeah. So how can someone prepare themselves? So coming into the sleep aspect, how do you prepare for a good night of sleep? I get asked this all the time.
Well, it starts in the morning. Like a lot of people think it's like your nighttime routine, but yes, that will help. But it really truly starts in the morning. And it's what you're doing in the morning that will impact your nighttime.
Oh,
So like even getting up without an alarm clock, getting the sun, getting outside, seeing sunlight. Those are the big things that will help you with your sleep, right?
mhm.
Is just getting up and seeing that sunlight, getting outside, get some fresh air. Like a lot of it has to do with our circadian rhythm too, right? There's different reasons why people have sleep issues, right? But sometimes it can be our circadian rhythm, right? And everyone thinks of melatonin as, oh, like, that's what everyone wants to take because it's easily available. But it is a hormone. So too much of it or too little of it can cause issues.
Mhm.
And melatonin is only one hormone that people think of that's on a 24-hour cycle. But it's not just melatonin. Every single cell in our body is on a 24-hour cycle, right? So when you don't sleep well, every single cell in your body is impacted. And that means every hormone and every cellular process, everything that happens in your body can be impacted with not sleeping well.
Yeah. Okay. So with the talk of hormones, hormones can affect sleep patterns. What are the major hormones that can affect sleep?
Well, one is the melatonin, right? But you want to have it spiking at nighttime and going down in the morning. And you want your cortisol to go down at nighttime, but peak as you wake up in the morning,
Mhm.
right? So what happens when people don't sleep well, their circadian rhythms can be off, and that messes up the cortisol. So I have a lot of people think, oh, my cortisol is too high, and then they think cortisol is really bad. But cortisol is also another anti-inflammatory. So cortisol is good. It's just a matter if it's working for you, right? Like
Mm.
if you're sleeping well, then the cortisol should be working well. But when it becomes problematic when you have too much cortisol or if it's
Mhm.
spiking at the wrong time. And a lot of time people feel like they're tired but wired. And that's usually because their cortisol is spiking at nighttime when it should be going down.
Mm.
There's those. And there's also for females, like when you get perimenopausal, menopausal, there's a higher risk for sleep disorder breathing in females because of the protection we have with progesterone.
Mhm.
We become more sensitive to carbon dioxide when our hormones change, which means our breathing pattern can change. When we're more sensitive to carbon dioxide, we end up breathing faster. And when we breathe faster, it's harder to get into a deeper sleep and to get into that good quality sleep.
Mhm. And is that sleep disordered breathing, or what? How would you define sleep disordered breathing?
So sleep disorder breathing, yes, you're not breathing. Basically, you're not breathing properly, and it can be most of the time you're breathing too fast, right? Or you stop breathing, right? So there's going to be two things. So there's a spectrum where you have upper airway resistance syndrome, where you don't have sleep apnea, but you're getting resistance from the muscles because their muscles are not working properly and is impacting how your ability to breathe properly at nighttime
Mhm.
because they can be collapsing. And then you can go up to snoring, which snoring is a partial collapse of your airways. So when you snore, it can be your throat's collapsing, your roof of your mouth is falling down, or your tongue's falling back. And
Yeah.
then when you have sleep apnea, that's a complete uh, collapse. So our airways are completely blocked, and that's when you stop breathing. That's where you have the hypoxia, right? Where you're not getting that oxygen to your brain because you're not breathing, right? But you can have stages before
Mhm.
that people don't realize, because that's why people don't realize you don't need to snore to have a sleep disorder breathing.
Mhm.
So a lot of people might say, I don't snore, I'm fine. But yeah, but you may not snore, but you still can have sleep disorder breathing.
Yeah.
And then, as mentioned before, you might present as waking up throughout the night. Insomnia can be a sign of sleep disorder breathing, especially for females.
Mm. So you mentioned with snoring. So are there ways to stop snoring?
The best way really is to strengthen the muscles, right? To keep your
Mhm.
airways open and retrain your breathing. That is the best way. Um, People can tape their mouth, but you have to be careful because if you have a deviated septum, you may not be able to do it. If you have any structures that are not optimal in your mouth and throat that can block your airways, if you end up taping your mouth, then you won't be able to breathe properly. You don't want to do it if you're on taking any sleeping aids, if you've drank, if you're sick. But taping your mouth can help because you end up closing your mouth, right? And then you're breathing through your nose. And when you breathe through your nose, it helps, but you still can snore. You can still snore with your nose,
Okay. That
right?
was going to be my next question was, can you snore if you're only breathing through your nose and if your mouth is closed?
Yeah, because your tongue still will fall back, right? And
Yeah.
if the muscles are not working properly, they can still all do that partial collapse, which causes the snoring.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, we hear 6 to 8 hours of sleep per night. Is that what you recommend? How much sleep should someone be getting?
Well, it depends on your age, but for adults, we usually say between 7 and 9.
Between 7 and 9. Yeah, yeah. I think it's more when you're younger, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I know. I think that with my daughter all the time, and she has to wake up at 5:40 in the morning, and I think, oh my goodness, she's 7 years old. She has to get up at 5:40 in the morning. She is not getting enough sleep.
Yeah, they should be getting at least 10 hours, right? So 10 to 11 hours at that age. So yeah, you need.
And it is in the high school range too, right? Isn't it
Yeah.
between 9 and 11? Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. That
And
made so
especially if
much
you're an
sense once I
athlete.
read that. Mm.
Yeah. So especially if you're an athlete, so even high level athletes will, they can, like even adults, whatever, they'll need more on the higher end of like 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
If they're elite athletes, right? They usually need that much. And if you look at some of the athletes, they will talk about it, that their sleep is their recovery, right? Because that's how you recover, is during your sleep. So it's not just what you're doing during the day, your activities and training that way. It's getting that proper sleep so you recover.
Yeah. So much healing can happen as the body is able to restore while we're sleeping.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is like, you break your bodies down during the day and you repair it at nighttime.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think about naps?
Naps, it depends when you're taking it and why you want to take it. So naps are good if you either do like a power nap, so like 15 to 20 minutes, or you do a whole cycle, and a whole cycle of sleep is usually about an hour and a half. So it's either you want to do 20 or you want to do an hour and a half, but you don't want to do 2, because then you wake up and you feel groggy and you feel crappy and you don't feel as good, right? So you want to stay more at the hour and a half. But if you need to sleep an hour and a half every day, then that will interfere with your sleep quality at nighttime, because you lose that sleep pressure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, but if you're also sleeping through the night and then you still feel like you need an hour and a half, then I would really question what your sleep quality is like and why you want to sleep that much. Like a power nap is fine, because sometimes people just do it as a break, and then it has shown to you're more productive, you're more efficient after you have a power nap. But it just depends on why. So power naps usually are totally fine. But as I said, it depends why you want to take such a long nap, right? If you're wanting to sleep an hour and a half, if it's once in a while or you didn't sleep well because you were sick, then that's totally fine. But if you're doing it on a regular basis and you want to question, why are you sleeping that long?
Mm-hmm.
And then you also want to do it not too late, because if you do it too late, then your sleep pressure will go down, which means that you won't have that same pressure to stay asleep at nighttime. You
Mm-hmm.
want to have a high sleep pressure when you go to bed.
Is there a best time of day to take a nap?
I would definitely say before 3. Latest would be at 3 o'clock, but you definitely want to nap before that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say so too. Taking a siesta.
Yeah.
Can also, especially those power naps of 20 minutes, just kind of letting the nervous system come into self-regulation a little bit can be so helpful. So I'd love to, and I don't know what they are, and I don't know how many there are, but I'd love to explore some potential myths about sleeping, that maybe you could help us bust some myths about ideas that we might have that are not actually true.
Well, one of them would be snoring. I would think is a big one. Like even with the kids, they'll be like, "Oh, the baby snores. It's so cute." But it's like, okay, it might look cute, but it's actually not. That's not good. A baby should never. No one actually, including no one, should be ever snore. Like snoring, as I said, is a sign of a partial collapse of your airways. Right. So kids can have sleep apnea, and that's what people may not realize, is that kids can have sleep apnea. Babies can have sleep apnea. So if your kid is snoring or mouth breathing at nighttime or grinding or clenching their teeth, then that can be a sign of sleep disorder breathing. And I just think, yeah, people, and I was like that too. Like my mom has sleep apnea. And before I knew all about this, we used to say how loud she used to snore, and we thought it was always funny. And that's what people do, right? They think snoring's funny, which, but in reality, it's actually very dangerous. So we really need to take, and that's just the way our society has been, is that we don't take snoring seriously, and everyone dismisses it. I was even reading some posts, and people were commenting that they're putting earplugs in because their partner snores. So their partner's not addressing their snoring, right? So not only is the person snoring not sleeping well, but their partner's not sleeping well. So then both sleep qualities are compromised and you're at a higher risk for all health issues, right? You can't get the same benefit of exercise and proper nutrition without sleeping well.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be my number one, is snoring is not normal. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
common, but it's not normal.
Yeah. I mean, I even know people who won't even sleep in the same room as their partner because the snoring is so intense.
Yeah. And that's why, like, that should be addressed, right? Like, because that's the thing too. Like, yeah, you're taking away your intimacy by sleeping in a different bed
Mm,
than the snoring.
yeah. Any other myths that you'd want to bust?
Yeah.
What
My other
about,
one would be
oh yeah.
parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because parents are told, like, I remember when I was pregnant with my daughter, everyone's like, oh, your sleep's going to be crappy after this. It's going to be, you're never going to sleep the same. And I believed that, right? Until I started doing when I had my own sleep issues, and I started doing the research, and I realized, no, like, yes, it's going to be crappy when you're getting up to feed them and nurse them at nighttime. But once that's done and they're sleeping through the night, there's no reason why your sleep should go back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
You'll still wake up if they really need you when they're older. They'll scream or cry loud enough that it'll wake you up, right? But yeah, you should be able to get back to normal sleep. Light sleeping is not, and people just accept it, like, oh, I just sleep lightly, or they'll use white noise, or once again earplugs. But if you need to use those sources, then your sleep quality is compromised.
Mm.
And especially for females, like, you grew a baby for 9-10 months, and then if you nurse them, like, you're depleted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't take the right supplements, or you didn't take enough of the supplements, then you're depleted. And that's part of the cycle where you probably started for sleep issues,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't have the chemical to get you into that rest and like that calming state for sleeping.
Yeah. I think I definitely had some sleep disturbances after having my daughter. And I think part of it was just, you get on such high alert from hearing them cry for milk that you almost anticipate it for several months after, even once they're sleeping through the night. Now, my daughter was colicky, so she cried from 10 at night till 7 in the morning every night
Oh my
for
gosh.
8 or 9 months. So that was really intense. So my husband would stay up with her all night. And then I would wear earplugs, and he'd come in when he felt like it was time for her to nurse. And then finally, around 9 months, she actually started being able to sleep, and she started being able to sleep through the night. But for about another year and a half, maybe, I mean, my body was on alert during the nighttime. And I think that I finally had to coach myself out of it. Certainly, I noticed it in the back of my head where my head meets the neck. So in those suboccipital area, that myodural bridge, I was getting a lot of dural headaches, just because I couldn't turn myself off from the anticipation of her crying.
Yeah. And that totally helps. Plus, if you're also sleep deprived too, you're already going to be in that sympathetic, right? Because when you're sleep deprived or your sleep quality is compromised, you end up staying in that fight or flight system, that system where you want to run away from a lion. And that's hard to get into that rest and digest system until you retrain it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's another component too, right? Because if you're up a lot with the baby, like, I was fortunate, my daughter, she slept through the night at 3 months, but then my son, so I got spoiled. I was like, oh, this is not too bad. I have my son, and it was totally different, and he was up a lot more, right? But you got more, it gets more interfered with you, right? So that will make you more prone to get into that fight or flight system. And
Mm-hmm.
especially you're more depleted. Like, for me too, after having my second, I was more depleted,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you get more likely that you're going to stay in that flight or flight system because you don't have that ability, you don't have the right chemicals in your body to get into that rest and digest system you need to get into sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to work really hard to coach myself back into it. Now I'm good. So what you mentioned, um, some sound machines. What do you think about sound machines for sleep? So now, because my daughter was colicky, we used a sound machine, and now she's 7.5 and she cannot sleep without a sound machine. Have we
Yeah, I
ruined
think for
her?
sound machine, like I think they're like if it's not of noise, it's not like some people use it for like to block out other noise too, but some use it too as
Mhm.
a calming frequency, and it does. It has shown that it helps get you into that rest and digest system. So that is fine. My son actually, he was similar too, where we had to get him to calm down a little bit was just to play music, and he's loves music, and to this day he still loves music. Right? We don't have to do it at nighttime anymore, but that was how we calmed him down sometimes when he was teething and all that stuff. It was putting music on, baby music,
Mhm.
lullabies, right? And he loved it. So I have
Yeah, we
no
have
issue
these
with that,
like
'cause especially if it's the right frequency, then that's good for sleeping.
yeah. Well, ours is rain. It's like summer rain or something like
Okay.
that that helps her sleep. But even when we're driving in the car, she feels like she can't fall asleep without it, which is funny because she will have just had a fall asleep, which she says, "Oh, I didn't sleep, I just rested." But she definitely has fallen asleep. So she doesn't need it, and we know that she doesn't need it, but she feels like she needs it in order to sleep. So I think she's gained a little dependency on it because she's just always had it.
Yeah, and that's right. And that's exactly what I was gonna say. Like if you've always had it, taking it away, it will be harder, right? But that is a minor issue because that just helps get you into that rest and digest. My other issue would be like, what device are you using? Because then if you have your phone in your room, like I'm all believer phones out of your room. I turn my phone off at nighttime, right? So like no electronics in the bedroom is really another thing, right? So then there's that battle, right? Because if you want something to help fall asleep, then it's hard now. We don't have those tape recorders or the CD players that we used to have, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, we have to we use our phones for it now.
So is there a kind of like routine getting ready for bed that you do recommend? So you had mentioned phones, keeping your phones outside of the room, keeping electronics outside of the room.
The other thing would be dimming the lights at nighttime too, because you
Mm.
want your brain to know it's bedtime. Because when you have this artificial lights on, because that's part of the reason why our sleep quality has changed too, is all the technology and with lights, our brain thinks it's time to be awake,
Hmm.
right? So if you have those bright overhead lights on all the time, then your brain's not going to realize it's bedtime. And then you go to bed, you turn off all the lights, and then your cortisol will still be high because of that, because it's
Mm.
still thinking it's nighttime or daytime.
Daytime. Yeah, there are certain glasses that you can order and use too.
Yeah, that'll block out the blue light. Yeah, you can use those as well.
Hmm.
But usually, like, you want to be off electronics anyway before bed because it's not necessarily just the blue light that interferes with you, it's that stimulation of the brain, right? Like if you're scrolling through on social media, that's a stimulation, right? So the blue light, yes, it'll help you with the blue light, but it's not going to help you with that brain stimulation.
Hmm. I remember reading years ago that, well, we know that when we're watching a TV show or a movie or something, the amount of pixels that are happening per second, it's incredible what they're able to do. But it is so much stimulation for the brain, like you just mentioned. And I remember reading, because we always think, oh, I'm just going to relax and watch a show, or I'm going to relax and watch a movie, or, and then I read an article and it said that is actually the opposite of what that's doing. Is actually so much stimulation for the brain that it almost like feels like it's tiring you out because of the stimulation. And I was just shocked by that because I do sit down and watch something at night in order to quote rest, but is that actually good rest?
Yeah, yeah, right. And that is right. Like, it's not the best rest. The other thing would be too, it depends. Like, sometimes if you're having comedy and all that stuff, then if you're laughing a lot, you're getting your oxytocin
Mm.
release, right? And oxytocin does help with sleep. So it depends what you're watching too. Like, if you're watching, I wouldn't recommend, like, a lot of shooting and all that stuff, like watching videos and shows like with that, killings and all like
Mhm.
that, because can interfere with sleep. Some people are more sensitive to that,
Mhm.
right? And then some people have a hard time too. Sometimes their brains don't know the difference between real and
Mm.
TV.
Yeah,
So that can also interfere with the sleep too.
right. Yeah, I usually watch fantasy, but that totally makes sense that which is, swords and lightsabers. Uh, but it makes sense that if you're watching comedy and just with the laughter, I mean, I talk about probably one of my favorite ways into the parasympathetic nervous system is through laughter. And the reason is because a lot of people mention humming and singing, but I work with the demographic that is their profession. So how can we use something that is our profession that might be what's stressing us out as a calming mechanism? And so for me, I'm always mentioning laughter, the importance of laughter and having that to help bring us into our parasympathetic nervous system. So it would totally make sense that if we're watching something that's, causing, watching the animal videos on YouTube or something that are super adorable and we're laughing at, could help us kind of reprogram and get ready for some sleep. And part of that is getting us into that parasympathetic nervous system. So that makes so much sense to me.
Yeah. And then speaking like with the oxytocin too, like a lot for females too, when we get into perimenopausal and menopause, we always think it's progesterone and estrogen that are culprits, right? But yes, they're definitely playing a role, but there's actually other hormones that are actually can mimic the symptoms of perimenopausal and menopause. And a lot of people think too, like, oh, I can't fix it, just menopause. But if you look, not everyone that has menopause has sleep issues, right? Like if you look at it, not everyone will. Not every single person is going to have insomnia when they're menopausal or have sleep apnea. So what is the difference, right? So one part of it is the muscles working in the throat for the sleep apnea. But the other part would be the other hormones that play a role in our sleep too, when we get more perimenopause and menopause, is our insulin, our oxytocin, and our cortisol. As those get imbalanced, that's where we have some more issues. We become more insulin, we're a lot more resistant to insulin when we get perimenopausal and menopause.
Mm-hmm. What can we do about that?
It's all about that back to our diet. So really, you have to really watch what you're eating and limit your simple sugars, right? Those are probably the biggest things. Is really women unfortunately have to be a lot more strict with their diet as we get older.
Yeah.
Right. And then get the oxytocin, right? Like how do you get that release, as you said, with laughter, intimacy, right? Like get that release too. That will also help you balance that. And then keeping that circadian rhythm too, right? So trying to get that sunlight in the morning and at nighttime, so you're keeping your cortisol levels more balanced. But really it does come back to the diet of eating a lot less sugar, because we're a lot more sensitive. We're more sensitive to carbohydrates. And so we have to be more careful of what we're eating at that stage.
Yeah. So before, I know you have to run soon, but before we have to go, I want to just chat about sleep bruxism. So bruxism during the day, or the clenching that might be happening during the day, which is completely and totally possible. But a lot of people have sleep bruxism where they're clenching at night. And again, this is a question I get all the time of how can I stop my sleep bruxism? Do you have any recommendations?
So that actually is a sign of sleep disorder breathing, right? So a lot of times, not every time, because there can be something else going on with your system, right? That it can be a chemical or something off. But a lot of times it is how we're breathing at nighttime and what our muscles are doing. And there was a new article that just came out that Ask the Dentist posted, that it was saying that with grinding, what happens is that you're trying to open your airways. So what you're trying to do is pull your jaw forward and back to open up the airways, right? So instead of stop breathing too, you're doing that. Or you stop the oxygen too, and they say that's what sometimes stimulates the bruxism is as you're breathing, you're not breathing properly, or you stop breathing, and that's your way to compensate.
Yeah. I mean, we see that so much since the start of the pandemic with wearing masks, and so many people are protruding their jaw in order to help open their airway, because breathing while wearing a mask is more challenging. So the amount of people that I've had come in and talk to me about different jaw issues or symptoms that they've been encountering, many people recognize that that's how they've been holding their jaw. Many of them actually recognize why they're doing that. to open their airway. Not all, but many of them do recognize I'm doing this in order to help open my airway. And then how much of an impact, I don't know. Maybe someone will do research on this at some point. How many people have come into more sleep bruxism at night due to how we're having to hold a jaw position in mask? I don't know.
Well, it was interesting because what the dentists were seeing, they were seeing a higher incidence of cavities and that comes back to if you're more mouth breathing, right? Because if you're protruding your jaw, you're opening your mouth, so you're more mouth breathing, right? We don't filter the air when we mouth breathe. So that's why breathing through the nose is another big part. So we want to filter that air. So so you have a gut biome, right? Everyone probably hears, but that's your second gut. Your second brain is your gut, but it really starts in your mouth, right? So if you're mouth breathing, then you're not filtering that air. So you're getting bad bacteria in there. It's changing that. So they're getting an increase in cavities, right? Or even periodontal disease, right? Like all of that stuff, because all that stuff is changing because people are more mouth breathing. Or during the pandemic too, the stress levels were extremely high, right? So when we're stressed, what do we end up doing? We end up breathing faster, which means breathing through your mouth usually. Very rarely can you breathe fast through your nose. It's usually you have to open your mouth to breathe faster. And then so that increased stress level, then they were seeing that. And then also there's connections to heart attacks and your mouth or a biome, right? So everything is connected. It really is. And I do so really, and also to work on your stomach health, it really starts in the mouth.
Yeah, it does. I really saw when I was doing my clinicals, I worked in hospice, and then with the passing of my dad before he passed, what you see a lot in hospice, and certainly with my dad at the end of his life, was an open mouth. They're breathing through their mouth and their teeth are all decaying because of that bacterial that you talked about. So it's so fascinating. I didn't even think about how that could impact throughout mask wearing, mouth breathing, what that's creating. Now, I mean, I still wear masks to work, but I'm very conscientious of how I am holding my jaw when I'm in that mask and how I'm breathing, and so that I'm not coming in and creating bad habits from something that I'm wearing. But
yeah, you should still be able to. You still can breathe through your nose when you're wearing a mask. But if you weren't a straight nose breather before, it's going to be a lot harder, right? So you have to retrain yourself to nose breathe in the mask.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of people who I know who have sleep apnea have said throughout the last couple of years, like, it's so difficult for me to wear a mask.
Yeah, and then that's usually what it is. The people that really struggle, my bet would be that they're mouth breathing. Yeah. Because the nose breathing, it shouldn't bother you too much, but yeah, the mouth breathing, it's a lot more problematic for people.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Is there anything else sleep disruptive related or airway related, or anything that you would want to say before we have to hop off?
No, I think that just for the grinding, I don't know if we really finished talking about, but like one is, it's an airway issue. So basically it is strengthening your upper airways, right? And changing breathing. That's how you're going to fix the bruxism.
Change your breathing and strengthen your upper airway.
Yeah, but that is definitely a sign of sleep disorder breathing too. So sleep study also could be indicated as well.
Great. Tierney, thank you so much for coming on. And I've learned so much in the last 35 minutes. So I'm so grateful to come on and talk. I haven't really talked a lot about this. I've read I've read a couple books and stuff, but to actually be able to have a conversation is always so helpful to me. So thank you for coming on and talking about sleep disorders and upper airway and snoring and all things involved. So great having a conversation with you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I enjoyed. I can tell I love talking about sleep. So anytime I can talk about it.
Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, tell your colleagues, students, and friends. Subscribe, rate, and please write a review. You can find us on Instagram or Facebook, and feel free to check out my website at www.thevisceralvoice.com for information on programs and upcoming events. I hope you join us next time for another wonderful conversation on the Visceral Voice.